Hi everybody, welcome back to the Opinionated Science Educator. We know that due to the COVID pandemic, a lot of teaching time has been lost and students were expected to do tasks and work on their own. But I've been teaching for a long time, and one of the things I know is that students do not do homework, or very few do homework. So here from my soapbox, I thought that I would create a video to talk about this lack of commitment from students in doing homework. As I did my preparation for this video, I began to see that the problem is far greater than just students' commitment to doing homework. And I began to see that the problem here, particularly in South Africa, is deeper, it's systemic. It relates to our education system as a whole. So let's look at the back to school for South African students. Changes have been planned for when schools reopen. So according to a government gazette, teachers and schools need to prepare for a more traditional return to the timetabling system at school later this month. So in the gazette published, Andy Mosega said that educators must continue with teaching and learning from the 19th of July in accordance with whichever timetable model the school uses. And this should continue until the 26th of July, after which daily attendance and traditional timetabling must be back to normal. Now, currently in most schools in South Africa, learners are using a shift system to attend school, and a large amount of coursework and learning has been expected to be done at home, and it's still being expected to do so in an effort to increase social distancing. So when they return, schools need to make use of the spaces available to them to increase social distancing, and students should rather stay in their class and teachers move. Now, the minister did say a lot of time has been lost to COVID, and education experts are warning that any delay in the school calendar is going to have a significant impact on South African students. And in a briefing in Parliament, it's already been mentioned that younger students are at risk of forgetting the skills that they have learned. There's also obviously a concern with the grade 12 cohort, which lost significant time in grade 11, and a lot of the work is examined in grade 12. So with the Minister of Education's expectation that schooling returns to normal by the end of July, it begs the question, is there a way to identify the gaps that have been created by this pandemic and the break in schooling of students? If students were given work, is there a way to find out if they had actually covered the work that was given to them? The state of California in the US looked at the amount of time that students spent working while schools were closed. And I'm going to go through that now. Now looking at the time spent by students on schoolwork during school closure using California as a case study. Remember, I started this video series thinking that students don't spend enough time doing schoolwork. Now, based on the information collected in California, it was found that more than half of the students are actually spending less time on their schoolwork during the pandemic than they did before the pandemic. Only 38% spend as much or more time on all their learning activities, and alarmingly, 55% reported spending less time on their schoolwork now than they did before the pandemic. So without that structure of school, they spent less time studying. In terms of a typical week for students at school in the US, they spend about 9.5 hours studying on their own. That's outside of school. Now, there were significant disparities along ethnic lines and socioeconomic lines. From the data in California, students in low-income families or without college-educated parents spent nearly 2 hours less than their affluent peers. The disparity along ethnic lines, African American students spent only about 8 hours studying on their own, which was significantly fewer hours than both the white and Asian American students, who spent 10 and 11 hours respectively. Now, in the US, the students are required to spend about 20 hours a week on their schoolwork, which relates to about 4 hours a day. And half of the students are not doing this. So that bar graph shows the disparities, with the stars highlighting the significant differences between groups. That case study clearly highlights that people from a poorer socioeconomic background spent less time working and doing the things that were given to them during the closure of schools. And we probably will find the same in South Africa, just purely based on the resources that students had access to. So how do we catch up? Should we expect students to do more work?
The following data was collected by OECD countries during the PISA assessment, and this question was asked of 15-year-olds. How much time do you spend on your schoolwork, both in school and after hours? So the question was, do students spend enough time learning? Now, we know that time is essential for learning, and in school, time is needed to give teachers and students the opportunity to cover the curriculum, repeat material, provide and receive feedback, and do activities and so on. So, across the OECD countries, students reported spending 44 hours per week learning. So as I said, that's school time and additional time such as homework, extra classes. This represents approximately 55% of a student's available time, excluding weekends, and 8 hours of sleep per day. So in the findings, the average was about 44 hours. That was the OECD average across the countries that participated in the study. And this graph represents half of the finding, and less time was spent in countries like Finland, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Norway, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and so on. So less time was spent by students actually at school. Now below that, this graph shows now those that spent more time. So there's the average. I had to cut this graph in two, and that represents an increase in time, and that includes countries like Hong Kong, Denmark, Chile, Italy, and so on. The United States as well. Now, in some countries and economies, such as China, Qatar, Thailand, Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, students spend at least 54 hours per week. And in countries like Finland and Germany, it's about 40 hours. Now, students in Australia, Finland, Germany, etc., showed the best balance between total learning and their academic performance. In school systems where students spend more time in regular science class, so this is interesting, as a science educator, their scores increased, and if they spend more time outside of class, it didn't actually impact on their performance. So the bottom line is, firstly, it's difficult to gauge, but students seem to be spending too much time doing extra work, and it's up to all parties to find ways to work together to maximize teaching time in the classroom.
So using the data from the case study in California, it's clear that socioeconomic factors have a huge impact on the amount of time that students spend on schoolwork. And in the South African context, because of the disparity and this inequality between the rich and poor, there is no way that students from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds have the resources to be able to spend doing work remotely. So in the next episode, I look at what the expectation is in terms of South Africa's curriculum framework. So thanks for joining the Opinionated Science Educator, and I will see you shortly with my next video.